You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome back, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I am sitting down with three incredible healthcare leaders and innovators, and we are doing another executive briefing, a panel discussion. We are flipping it upside down again, and we are going to talk about a number of different strategies and tactics that innovators can deploy in their commercialization process. Whether you are a startup entrepreneur or whether you're a corporate innovator, we have some wisdom and insights from our guests to share with you today. So I would like you all just to introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background and what you are innovating these days. Francesco, set us off.
Great, thank you. So great to be here, Dr. Roxy. Thank you. So my name is Francesco Lucarelli. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and Partner of HCB Health. We're a boutique full-service marketing, advertising, communications company located in Austin, Texas. A lot of our work is solved around the solutions for the healthcare arena. So pharmaceutical companies, as well as medical device companies. We really sort of specialize in emerging companies. So it's the sort of next tier companies, next gen companies that are bringing a first product or first device to market. So oftentimes we are working with them in terms of their 3 and 5 year commercialization strategy and how to get that device to market or product to market. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thanks.
Sorry, Chuck Hazzard. I'm the VP of Wearables and Integrations at Heads Up Health. We're a digital health analytics company. We use lifestyle data with medical records and blood labs to help with patient engagement for health clinics and coaches.
Welcome. Awesome. And Sara.
And me. So, hi, I am Sara Badahman. I am the founder of HIPAAtrek, which is a cloud-based healthcare compliance management software tool. We are located in St. Louis and in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have a healthcare background, which led me to founding my very first startup, HIPAAtrek.
Awesome. So, today's conversation is going to be about strategies and tactics. Everybody's at different places in this journey. And, my goal in putting together this show and this group of people today is to, just share some wisdom and some guidance for folks to be able to grab a golden nugget from this episode and go back and kind of see what are the implications and how they might apply that to their own businesses. So, Sara, let's just start off and talk about the entrepreneurial journey and share your story and some of the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Oh my, you told me we only have 20 minutes for the whole episode and you just asked me something that I love to talk about. So I will try to keep this as brief as possible.
All right.
So HIPAAtrek was founded 7 years ago. And prior to founding HIPAAtrek, I was in healthcare administration. I had worked a variety of different roles. I was an HIM at a hospital. I actually worked as an epidemiologist, which thanks to COVID, everybody now knows what that is. And I also was an administrator of a multidisciplinary practice. Through all of that, I actually saw a problem, a pain point, a need that we had at the clinic that I was running. And I looked for a solution and couldn't find it, right? Everything that I saw was incomplete, cumbersome, had like a GUI, like an interface that looked like it was from 1985, And so I thought, this is a problem I can solve. I'm a subject matter expert. I can get in and I can actually solve this problem. So in founding the company, I founded it a little bit late in my career. So I was in my late 30s when I first started HIPAAtrek. And so I was lucky enough that I had, investment money of my own that I had saved aside and a nest egg that I pulled from to get started, taught myself how to code and coded the first iteration of HIPAAtrek and released it. And it failed miserably because I am not a coder. I am a healthcare executive. And I learned that I needed to pull a team together. So I actually launched the first version of HIPAAtrek from my oldest daughter, who's now 25, her cardiac intensive care unit, where she was recovering from her second open heart surgery. And I launched the software from there. One of the doctors that we released it to met me at the hospital and told me I had a great idea, but I executed it poorly, and introduced me to Ed Camp, who is my co-founder now. And not to worry, there's not a single line of code that I wrote left inside of HIPAAtrek. So it does work now. No more failing code, which is awesome. But along through all of that, like, I learned that, I could do it, right? I just needed the right people, like, standing beside me and helping me to propel the company forward. That I didn't need to know how to do every single thing in order to push forward. I just had to have the idea and the tenacity to see it through.
Absolutely. So, Francesco, thinking about you coming from a big corporate background, what are some of the lessons that you've learned that might be similar or might be different than what Sara's just talking about?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, one of the things I pick up from what Sara just said was, the understanding and the willingness to know that you shouldn't try to go it all alone, right? And I think true leadership shows that, you surround yourself with strong and good people that help fill in the gaps where you don't have it. So that's, I think, one of the biggest lines that I would completely agree with Sara's experience, and I've seen that too. Additionally, and I think as you think about bringing something new to market, whether it's a technology, whether it's a product, whether it's a device, a drug, whatnot, it's the foresight of, I always tell teams and working with clients of, consider the end in mind at the beginning, right? What's the end point? What's the goal? Whom or what are we trying to change behaviorally? And if that's part of a customer journey, if that's part of a patient experience, okay, we need to understand that outcome up front to then define the early stages of that commercial path. And that can go all the way back to, clinical discovery and lab work and patient-reported outcomes and things of that nature. I'm sure we've all witnessed these things in the past experientially where that wasn't done. And, someone felt they brought a great therapeutic or a great technology or even a great wearable, Chuck, to the end stage, and they're ready to now bring it to market, but there's really not a need for it, or there really is not a true positive outcome for it. So that makes it all the more challenging. So I say to a lot of clients early on, one of my first engagements with them, of hope is not a strategy, right? And they sort of get a chuckle to it, but it's kind of very true. You can't just, hope and kind of stick your finger in the air and say, this is going to work. You really have to look at it from a pragmatic perspective and understand, what are we trying to do at the end to kind of bring that pathway all the way through.
So, starting off with a market need or a problem, just doesn't seem like rocket science, right? So what's happening? Like, why are we skipping over this step of starting with that versus technology? What's happening?
Go ahead, Francesco.
No, I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of folks do get tied up too much in their own verticals. And there's a lack of collaboration. There's a lack of, Sara mentioned earlier, right? The subject matter expert, that's great, but that does not, the jack of all trades, master of none versus the subject matter expert, right? I think the ideal scenario is when, Sara gave a great experience. She realized that she learned a lot and could do a lot, but she also realized where she wasn't the expert, and she was able to find a partner that was the expert. I think, again, it comes down to leadership and it comes down to innovation. And when you think about bringing new products to market, again, experientially, what I will share is that, I've seen some companies where you get the CEO founder phenomena, where they believe they can do every job function, and they can't. No offense to those out there, but they can't, and they struggle with that. But then you see the ones that are some of the most visionary CEOs and founders and entrepreneurs, and they will say, I am good at this, not ABCD. I'm going to bring in the A expert, the B expert, or quite honestly, some of them may not even be a subject matter expert in what they want to do, but they have a vision, and they will assemble that team of, I know I need an expert here and here and here. And by combining that resource, by getting over the idea of, I have to be the ego ruler of all, I can bring in those right people, that really sets them off on the right trajectory.
Yeah.
I think it goes even further than that too, Francesco, because one of the things that you said was like, sometimes there's not even a market fit, right? So one of the things that I did at HIPAAtrek before I even launched it was I talked to the people I was going to be selling it to, right? Do you even have this need? Just because I experienced it in the places I worked didn't mean that that was a universal problem that was out there. It could have been a Sara problem versus a problem that the whole healthcare industry was experiencing. So I went out there and I talked to people, right? So I actually worked with a brilliant man named Ron Story, who kind of helped me to figure it, right? So he called it goob, right? Get out of the building, where I had to get up and go out and talk to the people that I wanted to buy my software, which was something that was super hard for me, right? I am like an incredible introvert. I did not like talking with people. I know people are always surprised about that now, but this is 7 years later, Sara. If you were to talk to people who knew me before I started HIPAAtrek, like, there's no way, like if somebody had emailed me and asked me to do an event like this, I would have been like, oh, hell no, right? Speak in front of like massive audiences, which I do now on a regular basis on HIPAA compliance. Like there was no way I would have done that, right? But thanks to like the groundwork with this consultant that I was so fortunate enough to get in touch with and help me figure out that process, it actually helped me to see that there is a market need for it, because I did get out of the building and started talking to who our customers were going to be. And I found that I wasn't alone, right? Like it wasn't just a problem I had in my clinic or the hospital I was working at, or at the units that I was working in is when I was doing the epidemiology work. It was literally a problem that was not even localized to St. Louis. It was around the country, hospitals, clinics, long-term care facilities. Everybody was struggling with how to manage their HIPAA compliance, and not just HIPAA, but everything, right? Managing it through spreadsheets and through these disjointed processes. And so the more people we talked to, the more we realized this problem is a lot bigger than I thought it was, but had I found out during those first early days, I would have never even tapped into my nest egg. I would have never even gotten off the ground, because my idea would have been a good idea for Sara, but not a good idea for the world. And I think that that's something too, that a lot of founders struggle with when they have something that they think is such a brilliant idea, and they're so afraid to go out and talk to people. And look, I get it. I was afraid too. I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid of actually talking to people. Like I would drive to a clinic or a hospital that I had a meeting with, arrive half an hour early and sit out in my car and give myself a pep talk to even walk inside the building, right? To talk to the people I had set up the meetings with. So I get that it's a scary thing, but it's also a very necessary thing, because otherwise, when you get to the point when you're working with Francesco and his team, you're not going to have anything to give to them. You're going to pay Francesco a ton of money to not go anywhere.
And I think too, what you just said that I find really interesting is I'll use the word humility to describe that. You were humble enough to understand that you had to find out early on that I'm willing to shift my baby, right? I'm willing to sort of mold this clay into something that may not be what I'm thinking it needs to be, but what my customers and or my end market needs. And that's also one of the things I think, humility has to come to the table, because again, I've, experienced good and bad across the board. And when you have the leaders, the founders that can say, got a great idea, let's perfect it before it goes out to market, versus I've got a great idea and we're taking this to market. Well, that can be a huge miss. And, I think that's where it gets back to, are you a humble leader that can say somebody's going to help me get down that course a little bit smoother?
But there's a lot of misconceptions out there too that propel founders to take that route, Francesco, because like you see like all these accelerator programs out there that are giving you $25,000 to $100,000, and their whole thing is like, get it done fast, move faster, and you see on the news, like companies acquired after 5 or 6 years of being in business. And then, I look at where I'm at and it's like, oh, wow, like I'm not even close to being acquired yet. I still got like another 5-6 years before I'll be acquired, and it's like, but those founding stories or those acquisition stories are not always truthful to who they are. So you have to think about everything that's behind that, right? Because did they start working before they ever incorporated? Did they convert from an LLC to a C Corp? And then that's their start date for, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes behind that. But when we don't see that that's what's happening, then we think that that company started 3 years ago and they just had a $1 billion exit. How the heck did that happen?
Something's wrong with me if I haven't done that.
Exactly. But the thing is like, if they were honest, which was like a huge thing, right? So when we converted, we were an LLC when we first founded, and we converted to a C Corp in 2018, and we did not restart our start date, right? Like we were founded back in 2014. That's what we're going to stick with. People are going to know how long this journey took us. And also too, in healthcare, nobody wants to work with new companies. Like a lot of times to even win a contract, you have to be in business for at least 5 years. So it didn't help, so there's multiple reasons why that was important. But it is really important for when you are trying to start a company to realize that in healthcare, especially, your journey is going to take a long time, especially if you want to sell to hospitals. Like RFPs are going to have strict requirements upon how you can actually submit for those RFPs, including a time limit of how long you're in business. And there's nothing you can do to get around it. There's no amount of networking. There's no amount of how great your product is that's so much better than everybody else's. If you don't meet that timeline, you're not going to get the RFP, kind of period. Right. So it takes time, right, to develop. Like you're nurturing a living thing almost, right? So entrepreneurs like to call their businesses their babies. It's true.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear my horse of a dog walking around.
So Chuck, I want to kind of direct to you, and we're touching a little bit on data, and we're talking about the data, that the qualitative data or quantitative data that validates our business model or validates our business idea early on. But a lot of what you guys are doing at data at different stages. So what are some of the lessons that you learned for someone that's coming probably a little bit more greener than the rest of us when it comes to healthcare? So you're not necessarily an outsider, but like when you look at the ecosystem and the different things that we're talking about, what do you observe? And then how does data help us in this commercialization process?
Well, we've mainly been working with boutique practices for the most part of the last year. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are cash pay. More recently, we're seeing more startup companies, well-funded medical practices going after remote patient care, because now there are new codes so you can get reimbursed for like blood pressure monitoring, glucose monitoring, and that's where a lot of the things that are traditionally thought of as consumer devices can now be leveraged to generate more revenue. And so that's a use of traditionally lifestyle data for some of these new startup companies that are using our platform. As Sara was just mentioning, we've had opportunities to sort of get into some of the big hospital networks. And those are like a year-long sales cycle, at least, because of all the politics. And even if they say we want to use you, the people up top want to review everything 5 times and make sure it fits. But what we found, though, is for a vast majority of people in healthcare, not in the big hospital chain, they're more than willing and embrace using lifestyle data to keep in contact with their patients when they're not in the hospital or the health clinic, because that data is important. Is it getting to them? And you may not know that unless you're tracking it day to day.
Yeah, I think there's so much data that happens between the acute visit or the urgent visit and, just the traditional healthcare ecosystem that a lot of us are missing out on, that we're starting to have a little bit more interest in accumulating and weaving that into our ecosystem. Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. You know, when you touch on patient engagement, a lot of the things that we're talking about do touch patients in some form or fashion, and that we might be able to sell our solutions in this commercialization process. But I find that very often that sometimes we'll think of that as the, the finish line, but really being able to get someone to pay for something is very different than getting them to use it and use it on an ongoing basis, right? And adoption is really, really critical to our ROI and the investment that we've made in our success. So, and patient engagement is key.
Yeah, and that is one of the challenges whenever, like in our case, we provide a solution, a platform. There's a lot of data there. Who's going to look at it? If you go into most health clinics, they don't have time already. They're already way busy. They've got their EHR or whatever they have to put data into. So you leveraging like health coaches to be the people that are responsible as the primary point of contact for patients works really well. And that's where there's true success. The patients feel like they're part of their health journey and not just, somebody the doctor talks to once a year. So.
Thing to that, Chuck, and I'm just curious about it from a perspective of, the term patient engagement, unfortunately, has, in my mind, been co-opted into meaning everything and sometimes nothing. And when I consider it from my perspective, and again, working with clients and even, recently working on the development of a device that's utilized ultimately end stage by patients directly, it's really about what is an engaging element from a patient that you want to do, looking at it from the perspective of, is it day to day? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Yeah. What's the type of condition we're trying to do? And I think, Roxy, what you said about the data, right? We oftentimes look at like, okay, great. Now we've collected data, but then it falls short and not a lot is done with it. And I do believe that's where healthcare is catching up to other verticals and other industries, right? I mean, you look across, other verticals, big data is paid for hand over fist right now.
I think that a lot of the data in healthcare, though, is not shared because they're afraid of HIPAA. Yeah. Like, honestly, I think that's
Sara.
I know, but that is where a lot of it's coming from, right? Because like back in my role when I was an epidemiologist, like my role was to gather prevalence rates for end-stage renal disease and kind of calculate what we thought that was going to look like in a 1, 3, 5, 10-year span, right? And so I would go into clinics and I would have to educate them, because like if my job was I'm talking to cardiologists this month and I need to know all of their all their hypertension patients with a blood pressure result at their last reading of 140 or higher, right, on their systolic. And so I would go and I would try to gather this data. And they'd be like, they can't share it. And I was like, I literally need to know the number. You have 38 patients with hypertension of this number. I don't need to know any other data. I need to know a number. And I need to know age ranges, like, 20 to 30, 40 to 50. And it's all completely within HIPAA, right? But because also like they're afraid of HIPAA, number one, to share even that very innocuous kind of benign information that I'm asking for, they're afraid to share that information. But then also the EMRs do not make it easy to pull that type of information from, right? Because EMRs have, like in healthcare, we haven't had that interoperability requirement that's in literally every other sector, which we're trying to get there. We have the Cures Act now trying, CMS has pushed out some new regulations around that. But until we have true interoperability where like Chuck's devices can talk to the EMR and exchange data and it's EMR agnostic. Yeah, in real time, like that type of big data will not be used. So I'm here to tell you, it is not against HIPAA to share information, so long as you're sharing it within the guidelines of HIPAA, and sharing de-identified information is 100% permitted. And it is important not just to get better tools out there for the healthcare industry to be able to treat your patients, right? So like tools like what Chuck is developing and like the clients that Francesco is working for, they're on the cutting edge of technology and cannot seem to get the data that they need in order to push forward because healthcare doesn't want to share that information. It is allowed, right? So healthcare is harming itself by not allowing that information to be free flowing because like Chuck said, that data is the lifeblood, not just to the patient's better quality of life, but also to the business perspective of the healthcare industry as a whole.
I mean, quite honestly, it sounds like, when each of us has some spare time between us, we can crack that nut because I think we do have all the right parties here to put that piece of the puzzle together. But, I always look at the analogy of clinical trial registries, right? They do that level. And it's a small scale level, but they do that very well. And it's if that model could be replicated, and as you said, across EHRs, across wearables, bringing that in, the level of aggregate de-identified data could be so universally helpful that not only would there be immediate measurable impact to today, but that could also fuel the next wave of innovation by looking at that, by doing data cuts and splices and looking at things. And as you said, looking at it by, you name it, by age range, by different demo segments, by, I'll use your renal disease, by looking at hypertension and low EGFR coupled with, so much of that could be done. And I do feel like we're kind of playing the game with, one hand tied behind our back, if not both.
Well, it's out of fear a lot and fear of what, right? Fear of HIPAA, fear of losing market share, fear of fill in the blank. That's why that information's not being shared.
Fear of losing my customers because they're going to go somewhere else if I share that data with everyone else, so it's almost like there's this perception that if I don't share the data, then I keep my customers. If I do share the data, I'm at risk of losing them. And we've got to come up with a better strategy of keeping customers than data hostage.
Well, I mean, and today the OCR announced their 20th settlement for the Right of Access initiative, right? Where hospitals and clinics are actually blocking patients from getting access to their own records, which they have the right to, right? So why aren't we giving patients their own data back, right? Chuck is smiling. He's like, yes, I agree with you. And it is, not only is it against the law, it's like the right thing to do. But in healthcare, I don't know why, but we have a backwards way of thinking. And it's been that way. I mean, I've been in healthcare since pre-HIPAA, right? So it's been that way. We can't blame it all on HIPAA because it's been that way even since before HIPAA started, where we were just backwards in the way that we think about the data that we have belonging to the hospital, not even the doctor itself and not the patient. It belongs to the hospital, doesn't belong to anybody else, but the hospital will be free to share it if Novartis comes in and pays them to do it, right? Or, Big Pharma comes in and pays them for their information, they'll share it, right? Yeah. So it's like, how do we get this more free flowing of information? And we've tried, right? Back in 2009, with the high-tech rule, we thought that we were going to get HIEs, healthcare information exchanges. Those fell flat on their faces. We're just now starting to see a trickle of HIEs. But if you're not active in healthcare, just as a regular patient, you have no idea what an HIE is. So that's the next $1 billion idea, is how to create that as a private commercial business versus as a state run HIE.
And is that something that's going to come from the healthcare ecosystem? Is something going to happen that's going to be the catalyst for this transformation? Or is it going to be some type of heightened awareness and revolution or advocacy among consumers that finally come together and stand up and say, we're not taking this anymore. It's my data. I'm not going to argue with you to get it. You're going to pay me if you want it.
And I think it might be a mix of both, right? So we can take telehealth as an example, right? It took COVID. It took the whole world breaking before healthcare was all right, we'll do telehealth visits, I guess.
Yeah.
And then they let that genie out of the bottle. And even once they started seeing patients in person again, right? So Like I live in Southern Illinois, like an hour away from St. Louis. And I talk to my doctor on telehealth now. I was like, nope, not coming in the office unless you need me to, because I can do lab work down the street at Quest. I can get everything done here locally and still have you be my doctor without driving an hour each way to your office. Right. And so I will never go back unless I absolutely have to. Right. So it's kind of like that. It's going to take something like that. I honestly thought the pandemic would help with the HIE systems. I was wrong. But it at least got us telehealth and progressed that forward. I think that there is going to have to be some major event that occurs for HIEs to actually start to take off, just like it took a global pandemic for telehealth to start.
I think to pick up on that, there's really three things. I'm a big rule of three guy, so I like to do that. But I think there's three things embedded in this. So one way, as you said, Dr. Roxy, this idea of fear, it's in my mind, it's kind of ironic when you think about it, because as we individualize ourselves as consumers outside of healthcare, we give all our data away everywhere, and no one bats an eyelash on it. So that's point one. Point two, I do agree with what you said about, sort of the pandemic kind of getting people to begrudgingly accept telehealth and cover it and all those things. But I'm looking at it a little bit more, maybe glass half full of, I do think it's maybe just the beginning of the snowball. And I hope that maybe I'm just being wishful, but I'm hopeful that that's going to start to trickle that snowball downhill. And then I think the third thing of it, and this may sound a little bit outside the box, but I do believe that the more socialized advent of full genomic profiling and genetic testing is also going to be advantageous here, because I believe that's what is going to push that consumer activation. As you look at, and I'll look at it particularly from an oncology perspective, now patients can get, whole genome or whole exome sequencing done so that they can start to understand not only if they have a cancer diagnosis, what tumor types, what mutational status do they have, but also even some of the prognostic things of, you may be impacted by this. And that's going to hopefully, as that becomes a little bit more available and a little bit more cost effective, that's going to get people to change lifestyle habits, get more of Chuck's wearable type of technology to better their health. And I'm, again, maybe it's me glass half full, but I am really hopeful that that's going to get people to be more taking a part in it, and then also be more willing to say, well, hey, if this data helped me, now aggregate data is going to also help me. So there's a little bit of a pay it forward mentality too.
I'm really hoping that the digital health cards for the vaccinations becomes a catalyst for that, where it's kind of like the first time where we've kind of have mass market having ownership of this data point across the board. And it's like, okay, well, it's really convenient for me to have this personal health data. Maybe I should start adding some other pieces of data about myself and my family into this kind of ecosystem that we're just starting to scratch the surface to create. And maybe that'll start driving some more adoption and some more change in this. So I know we are at our time here today. We could probably talk about this for another 6 hours. And so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So if we could just kind of go around, how do folks get a hold of you if they want to follow up with you after the show?
Start with Francisco.
Yeah, sure. I'll go around the horn again. Sure. So please, if anyone would like to reach out and learn more about myself or HCB Health, you can go to our website, hcbhealth.com. You can reach out to me directly, Francesco. I know it's not an easy name, Francesco.Lucarelli, Lucarelli at hcbhealth.com. Would love to speak to you and engage and talk more about this, maybe some challenges that you might be having in your sort of commercialization journey. Thank you.
Sara, Chuck?
Chuck at headsuphealth.com. Obviously, the company is headsuphealth.com. We have both consumer products and healthcare products.
Okay.
Awesome. And me, Sara at HIPAAtrek.com. That's HIPAA with 1 P, 2 A's, TREK.com, just like Star Trek, but for HIPAA. where we have software that helps healthcare organizations administrate their compliance. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Sara with an H and Badahman, Badahman.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and gal, for joining me today for this very rich conversation.
Thanks, Roxy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and attention. To get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who shared the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.